Over the weekend, 4 Palestinian teenagers were killed by Israeli soldiers in the north of the occupied territories. Immediately, conflicting reports emerged as to the sequence of events in the 2 shooting incidents, as well as the use of live ammunition. The Real News spoke to Jesse Rosenfeld, the editor of the Daily Nuisance, who attended the funerals and investigated what actually occurred.
Well, the Daily Nuisance, we had been following the events of the unrest in Jerusalem all week and covering them. And after the 2 deaths in Iraq, Bahrain, it seemed like a real pivotal point, as there's the first casualty out of a week of serious clashes that people are starting to call the beginnings of a new intifada. Settlers from the nearby settlements decided to use Iraq, Bahrain, as they regularly do, as a throughway or passing point. So according to the International Solidarity Movement's media coordinator, who was in the town at the time, the Israeli army came in and started going door to door in the village, entering homes to try and effectively seal people into their homes. So youth came out and started throwing stones at the army. Then tear gas and rubber bullets erupted, and then shots were fired while the army was in the center of town. Now, the claims that have been coming from the army have been that soldiers were feeling trapped and threatened for their lives, but what the International Solidarity Movement media coordinator was clear in pointing out was that they had held the T intersection entering the town. The army could have left the town at any time, but instead decided to entrench themselves and not only use their regular methods of tear gas and rubber bullets, but also extended into live fire, which they then later denied.
The Real News also spoke to Ido Medics, the Daily Nuisance's photo editor and photographer. Medics served in the Israeli army in the Ramallah and Jenin regions during the outbreak of the Second Intifada. He disputes the army's claim that the first 2 teenagers were shot with rubber bullets.
No. It's a big slug of steel, and it's coated with like tire kind of rubber. It's really hard. But anyway, this is a rubber bullet. It also comes in like a ball shaped, but this is not what we see in the X-ray. He was shot at the back of his head, meaning he was running away or walking away or with his back to the soldiers.
While the funerals in Iraq, Bahrain were underway, 2 Palestinian teenagers were killed in the nearby village of Awarta during what the Israeli army called an attempted terrorist attack.
Well, I went to Iraq, Bahrain expecting a regular funeral and mourning session and understood the potential of renewed clashes with the Israeli army, but it got cut completely short as the funeral session, the burial ended. News got into the crowd very quickly about the shooting of 2 other boys in Awato, a village just on the other side of Nablus. What was interesting was even when we arrived at the hospital in Nablus, the bodies had yet to arrive. It's fairly routine for the Israeli army to hold up Palestinian ambulances, to delay and quarantine and not allow anyone into an area until they figure out what it is they want to do with the situation, what they, and the sort of message that they're going to release.
أستاذ أنت رئيس المجلس؟
نعم. إن الشباب الفلسطينيين اللي هم الشاب محمد قواريك وصلاح قواريك وهم بيكونوا أولاد خالات لبعضهم وكانوا بنفس المنطقة الأرض تبعتهم هي محاذية تقريبا 700 متر بمنطقة الحارة الشرقية عن أقرب بيت من قرية عورتا. تبعد عن مركز المستوطنة حوالي 2 كيلو. طبعا بعيدة عن أي المستوطنة أو عن الشيك الأمني أو السياج الأمني اللي بيعتبروه. الرواية الفلسطينيين والناس المزارعين من بعيد شافوا الشباب الفلسطينيين قاعدين على الأرض، الجيش طلب منهم يقعدوا، بعد 5 دقائق بالضبط أو 6 دقائق الجيش أطلق الرصاص عليهم. احنا واجهنا بالرواية هاي مع ضابط الارتباط الإسرائيلي حكى إنه صحيح بس لا بعد 7 دقائق احنا رايحين نتأكد كيف اللي صار، وهو ما قدرش ينقل لأن احنا واجهناه وقلنا له في عندنا شهود إنه شافوا الإسرائيليين اللي عندكم الجنود أطلقوا الرصاص عليهم، احنا بنأكد إنه هذول مزارعين كانوا بالأرض، عدد الحراسة والنقش كانت موجودة معاهم وكانوا بيصلحوا بالأرض المنطقة اللي اسمها المنطقة الشرقية لقرية عورتا منطقة البياضة.
Throughout the day, the Israeli army spokesperson provided the Real News with several versions of what had happened. The time, location, and circumstances of the incident changed several times. Initially, the army claimed that Palestinians, armed with pitchforks, attacked a soldier on patrol, whose unit spotted them and opened fire. Later versions admitted the Palestinians were in custody while killed, but said that they were detained because they were armed with knives, axes, or gardening picks. Israeli media repeated the army's version of events, claiming that while the Palestinians were detained, they tried to attack the soldiers with a bottle full of rocks and a syringe they found on the side of the road. In response, the army explained the soldiers fired 5 bullets into one of the teenagers and at least 2 into the other.
What is an attack? You define it by 2 basic factors: means and intention. If the soldiers captured someone who was so unthreatening to them, I mean, carrying gardening picks from which they've been disarmed, and these persons are so unthreatening to you that the soldiers would not even bother to bind them, as they say. This person, after 2 or 3 or 5 minutes, would be struck by madness and pick up a bottle from the ground and try to assault a soldier, you know, armed with an M16 and wearing a body armor. And I mean, it's like you captured two different sets of 2 persons.
Protests have been taking place throughout the occupied territories for years, and the killings came at the end of 2 weeks where tensions escalated throughout the West Bank and Jerusalem. Many have therefore been speculating whether the killings may provoke a popular uprising, like that of the late 80s and 2000s. Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, previously a presidential candidate and a longtime activist, attended the weekend funerals and spoke to the Daily Nuisance about the timing of these deaths.
Do you think this is the beginning of a new intifada? Do you think one is underway now?
Depends on what you mean by intifada.
Popular uprising.
You mean the first intifada? The answer is probably yes. It's popular, it's non-violent, it's peaceful. You mean the second intifada where Palestinians use military action? The answer is no. There is an agreement between all groups that we don't want to use military action, and the nature of this uprising, you can call it an uprising, is that it is popular and non-violent, and it is happening everywhere now, because these deaths and killings will provoke even more. But it is clear that people are unarmed, they have nothing to defend themselves with, encountering Israeli army and Israeli settlers who are both armed, and both are using guns to shoot and kill Palestinians.
The idea behind it is very similar to the way that the Second Intifada broke out in 2000, where on the ground Israel was making the occupation even more unbearable, while at the same time they were claiming to be interested in peace talks. Now, the result of that was, when the negotiations process broke down, or when any sort of attempt at pie-in-the-sky dreams towards optimism broke down, Israel absolved themselves of the responsibility and just blamed the Palestinians. And what it looks like they're trying to do here is exactly that. They minimize in the media the consequences of their actions. They downplay, they deny, they try and change the story, and then they use that opportunity to peddle the sort of discourse of peace as highly as they can. So when it falls through, they turn around and blame the Palestinians. So it's victim-free antagonism, effectively.